Good morning. Continuing on with my 2016 article, Music Educated and Uprooted, my story of rurality, whiteness, musicking and teaching, and action criticism of theory for music education. Page 38, we're on How a Boy Replanted His Roots. Once upon a time there was a boy whose life seemed like it was tumbling in the wind. His family was always the same, and he was lucky to have a father, mother, and brothers and sisters who cared for him, and yet as a family unit, they did not stay in one place for long. No place became home. This was not abnormal to him, because the boy's father was a carpenter who would spend a year here, a year there. It was the natural state of his family life to pick up and move. While the buildings his father built were sturdy and permanent, the family had no such permanent residence. The boy's older brothers and sisters seemed to suffer quite a lot from all the moving, especially as they entered middle and high school. The boy wanted roots in soil, and he wanted that soil to cultivate stability. He discovered that while he was young, his roots were strong and could retake many times. He made friends easily and also forgot them quickly when it was time to move on again. Looking back, unlike most children, he has few memories of early life. He supposes maybe places serve as markers for a person's memory. One day, the boy's parents told him that his grandpa had passed away. The boy wasn't surprised, since his grandpa was often bedridden with emphysema. The boy loved his grandpa, and the once red-haired, mostly gray man would roll cigarettes and sing Danny Boy to him in a comforting, scratchy baritone. The summer's gone and all the roses dying. It's you, must go and I must bide. His family was surprised at how well the boy took word that his grandpa had passed away. But in fact, the boy did not know the difference between passed away and passed out. He thought for sure that the family would make another long trip into the Pennsylvania mountains, loaded dents in the station wagon, and see grandpa when he awoke. It wasn't until later that the boy learned passed away meant dead, which is quite different than passed out, and that he would never hear his grandpa's song again. This was sad, but since by this point his family thought he was brave and strong, the boy held back tears. With grandpa relatively young and alone, and with the boy's parents recognizing the negative consequences of the uprooted modern way of living, the family moved home to Patton. Now, in the middle of the 4th grade, the boy was used to changing schools. He had already attended 4 different schools. But now, the boy could put down deeper roots. The boy made new friends, though he kept the habit of changing friends every couple of years, and even attended the same church, St. Mary's, for the next decade. With the help of speech therapists and special educators, he even went from being a low-performing student to managing a B average in high school, eventually leaving Patton to attend university. He was the first to do so in his family. Here's a death poem of Otsuan. Hidden among the roots of grass, I hear a cuckoo. According to Hoffman, Otsuan's death poem, written in 1807, evokes the imagery of cuckoos to suggest nostalgia, and here roots alludes to burial. For me, it was my grandfather's death that led to my rooting in the soils of Patton. It is death, after all, that makes soil fertile for the nourishment of roots. Discussing the uprooting nature of education, Percussionistica contend, quote, the social majorities need no saviors, no conscientization, no empowerment. They are impressively skillful at saving their worlds. They have been able to do so for 500 years. The newly minted expert has, as well as the established scholar, have much to learn about living well from the uneducated and the illiterate, if they can give up the arrogance of their expertise, end quote. When my family moved home to Patton, to this day I think of Patton as my home, I was able to implant roots and join the social majorities. That is, the people whom the neoliberal global economy generally wants to forget. Where church, town, community were very real places, Real in the sense of that people knew who each other were, Bates challenges music educators to recognize the social forces, including those within schools, that perpetuate poverty. He also problematizes poverty, suggesting the poor and rural can and do live rich musical lives. Musically rich lives. He recommends conceptualizing poverty in terms of needs fulfillment rather than income. I agree with this decoupling of economic poverty from social musical poverty. However, in the Illichin tradition, the very concept poverty is irredeemable because it is a condition created by institutions such as schools. Poor is not something people essentially are. Schools serve to adapt, integrate, tame, and dominate him. That's Illich and Verne. The last part, anyway. And I was adapted, integrated, tamed, dominated, and saved by music education. Saved from poverty and the rooted community, so-called poverty provides communities. I have climbed the socioeconomic ladder. I was a newly minted expert teacher in Maryland when I first began to question the benefit of such uprooting earnings for my improved socioeconomic status. I have since continued to music educate myself voluntarily in the hope of finding the type of happiness that comes naturally from living a rooted life. And it was only in reflection that I looked back and realized my desire to live a rooted life existed even in my earliest experiences. But this is an imperfect realization because, whether near home or not, I am caught in educational institutions, the ideal of permanent education, and continue to perpetuate its workforce. Okay, that was that section. So it starts with a big, long memoir section, right? Creative story, how a boy replanted his roots, telling my story of my youth. And I started uprooted, right? My parents would have probably been considered those who are trying to make it, right? Trying to better their station, moving from place to place for work. My dad was always trying to pick up Saturday jobs to make extra money, starting his own company as well as working for other people. Participating in global capitalism, moving and moving and moving and moving. My older sisters eventually found ways to root themselves in their communities, which just makes them stronger than me because they lived that life longer than I did, right? And my sister Chris rooting back in Patton and with her family and her beautiful children and grandchildren. And then my sister Mary rooting herself and her family, getting back to Pittsburgh area, right? And rooting herself in her children and grandchildren, as well as their activities, especially the arts and theater. Really rooting venture for her at the high school. She's done very important things there. My brother Joe never managed to root himself, which is very sad. And of course, after this article, right, that uprooting life eventually did catch up with him, right? And he passed. Not out. Okay, but then ultimately the rooting happens in resistance of the global economy, right? When my parents decide they're going to stay home, right? They're going to sacrifice their economic success, whatever little bit they had managed to accomplish through 20 years of hustling in Maryland, around DC and South. And so I learn the sacrifices we make to have more roots from them. Yes, and then I end with a criticism of myself, perpetuating this idea of permanent education. Have a good day.